All right. We are going to read a passage by one of my absolute favorite poets and authors, Maya Angelou. Born Marguerite Johnson Maya Angelou, 1928 to 2014. So this is her birth and death date. Struggled with racism, poverty, and ill treatment early in her life. Across her long career, she was a dancer, actress, singer, teacher, and writer. Angelou became one of the best known African American authors in the world, and she was an activist for women and for the African American community. All right, let's go ahead and jump into today's text. Remember, we always like to look at if there is a picture given to us, it might have some context clues as well as the title. So, from Mom and Me and Mom, I feel like this might be a generational story as well. Perhaps maybe talking about mom, a daughter, maybe even a grandma, or maybe just referring back to the mom. I'm not sure. I see suitcases. I see a lot of women standing in a line. It doesn't look necessarily like the fashion we would see today, especially the suitcases. So I'm going to guess this is in the I don't know, maybe 40s or 50s, perhaps 60s. We'll see, just based on the shoe style, the dress, and the suitcases. So let's go ahead and read the background first. When Maya Angelou was 3 years old and her brother Bailey was 5, her parents divorced and sent the children off to live with their grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. It's kind of a strange name for a town, Stamps. When Maya was 13, she and Bailey were sent back to San Francisco to live with their mother, Vivian Baxter. Okay, so this is some context for us. Maya Angelou is the main character, so that would be a who. When she was 3, her brother Bailey, that would be another who. So they're about 2 years apart. So her parents divorced and she was sent to live with her grandma. And Stamps would be a where. When she was 13, her and Bailey were sent back to San Francisco. So that's another where. So they are literally going from the south to the west. And Vivian Baxter is another who, that would be their mother. And just keeping in mind the brother's name is Bailey, and he is only 2 years older. And this is an excerpt from a book, so we're going to be reading just a small portion of it. My grandmother made arrangements with 2 Pullman car porters and a dining car waiter for tickets for herself, my brother, and me. She said she and I would go to California first, and Bailey would follow a month later. She said she didn't want to leave me without adult supervision because I was a 13-year-old girl. Bailey would be safe with Uncle Willie. Bailey thought he was looking after Uncle Willie, but the truth was Uncle Willie was looking after him. By the time the train reached California, I had become too frightened to accept the idea that I was going to meet my mother at last. My grandmother took my hands. Sister, there's nothing to be scared for. She is your mother, that's all. We're not surprising her. So I feel like this is a contradiction because most girls aren't going to be scared of their mother. So I'm kind of going to ask, why is she scared? And I think I saw an again and again. She said. Okay, Uncle Willie would be another who. And if you didn't know, a Pullman car is a railroad car. So they're on a train going to go to California. And she's with her grandma. Let's check out the next page. When she received my letter explaining how Junior was growing up, she invited us to come to California. Grandmother rocked me in her arms and hummed. I calmed down. When we descended the train steps, I looked for someone who could be my mother. When I heard my grandmother's voice call out, I followed the voice, and I knew she had made a mistake. But the pretty little woman with red lips and high heels came running to my grandmother. Mother Annie! Mother Annie! Grandmother opened her arms and embraced the woman. When Mama's arms fell, the woman asked, "Where's my baby?" She looked around and saw me. I wanted to sink into the ground. I wasn't even pretty or cute. That woman who looked like a movie star deserved a better looking daughter than me. I knew it, and was sure she would know it as soon as she saw me. Maya Marguerite, my baby. Suddenly, I was wrapped in her arms and in her perfume. She pushed away and looked at me. Oh, baby, you're beautiful and so tall. You look like your daddy and me. I'm so glad to see you. She kissed me. I had not received one kiss in all the years in Arkansas. Often my grandmother would call me and show me off to her visitors. This is my grandbaby. She would stroke me and smile. And that was the closest I had come to being kissed. Now Vivian Baxter was kissing my cheeks, my lips, my hands. Since I didn't know what to do, I did nothing. Okay, so very interesting the fact that she's never met her mother, right? And she's on a train going to meet her, it sounds like, for the first time, or first time in quite a lot since she was 3 years old. So one thing is I'm confused. I don't know who Junior is. I don't know if that's referring to her brother Bailey, and they call him Junior. Another thing is that she'd never been kissed before, and I feel like that's a contradiction. Most children are loved by their family and maybe show physical admiration for their kids by kissing or hugging. And then also kind of a contradiction, she didn't know what to do with herself. Her home, which was a boarding house, and if you look down below, a boarding house is where people rent one or more rooms, was filled with heavy and very uncomfortable furniture. She showed me a room and said it was mine. I told her I wanted to sleep with Mama. Vivian said, I suppose you slept with your grandmother in Stamps, but she will be going home soon and you'll need to get used to sleeping in your own room. So Vivian is the mom's name. My grandmother stayed in California watching me and everything that happened around me, and when she decided that everything was all right, she was happy. I was not. She began to talk about going home and wondering how our crippled son was getting along. I was afraid to let her leave me, but she said, You're with your mother now, and your brother will be coming soon. Trust me, but more than that, trust the Lord. He will look after you. Okay, so this sounds like words of the wiser. Grandmother smiled when Mother played jazz and blues very loudly on her record player. Sometimes she would dance just because she felt like it, alone, by herself, in the middle of the floor, while Grandmother accepted behavior so different. I just couldn't get used to it. So it sounds like the grandma is very different from Vivian, who is Maya's mother. Sounds like they live very different lifestyles indeed. She can't really get used to what's happening. My mother watched me without saying much for about 2 weeks. Then we had what was to become familiar as a sit down talk to. She said, Maya, you disapprove of me because I'm not like your grandmother. That's true, I am not. But I am your mother, and I am working some part of my anatomy off to pay for this roof over your head. Meaning I'm working my body off. When you go to school, the teacher will smile at you, and you will smile back. Students you don't even know will smile, and you will smile. But on the other hand, I am your mother. If you can force one smile on your face for strangers, do it for me. I promise you, I will appreciate it. She put her hand on my cheek and smiled. Come on, baby, smile for mother. Come on, be charitable, meaning be giving. She made a funny face, and against my will, I smiled. She kissed me on the lips and started to cry. That's the first time I have seen you smile. It's a beautiful smile. Mother's beautiful daughter can smile. I was not used to being called beautiful. So, another thing that I'm noticing that's a trend is going back and circling beautiful. Um, I feel like pretty or even cute. Beautiful. Yeah, so I feel like those definitely, it's again and again. And she has a lot of um, doubt in herself, a lot of kind of self-conscious about herself. That day I learned I could be a giver simply by bringing a smile to another person. The ensuing years have taught me that a kind word or a vote of support can be a charitable gift. I can move over and make another place for another to sit. I can turn my music up if it pleases or turn it down if it's annoying. I may never know it as a philanthropist, but I want to be known as charitable. Philanthropist is someone who gives back to the community. Okay? I was beginning to appreciate her. I liked to hear her laugh because I noticed that she never laughed at anyone. After a few weeks, it became clear that I was not using any title when I spoke to her. In fact, I rarely started conversations. Most often, I simply responded when I was spoken to. She asked me into her room. I sat on her bed and didn't invite me to join her. Maya, I am your mother. Despite the fact that I left you for years, I am your mother. You know that, don't you? I said, Yes, ma'am. I'd been answering her briefly with a few words since my arrival in California. You don't have to say ma'am to me. You're not in Arkansas. No, ma'am. No. You don't want to call me mother, do you? I remained silent. This would definitely be a tough question. She's not sure if she feels comfortable. Does she feel comfortable calling her mom by mother, right? It's like she's gone all this time without her being in her life, and now all of a sudden she's not sure what to think. You have to call me something. We can't go through life without you addressing me. What would you like to call me? I'd been thinking of that since I first saw her. I said, Lady. What? Lady. Why? Because you're so beautiful and you don't look like a mother. Well, is Lady a person you like? I didn't answer. Is Lady a person you might learn to like? She waited as I thought about it. I said, Yes. Well, that's it. I am Lady and still your mother. Okay, so Lady is being repeated again and again. And I think it's being repeated because she's not comfortable calling her mom and she doesn't feel like she really can be a mom to her. She says, You're too beautiful. Remember that word was repeated too, and you don't look like a mother. So she doesn't see Vivian as a mother figure, right? Yes, ma'am. Yes. At the right time, I will introduce my new name. She left me, turned up the player, and sang loudly with the music. The next day, I realized she must have spoken to my grandmother. Grandmother came into my bedroom. Sister, she is your mother, and she does care for you. I said, I'll wait till Bailey gets here. He'll know what to do and whether we should call her Lady. Remember, Bailey's the brother. And then we're going to go into chapter 4. Mother, grandmother, and I waited at the railway station. Bailey descended from the train and saw me first. The smile that took over his face made me forget all the discomfort I had felt since coming to California. His eyes found grandmother, and his smile changed to a grin, and he waved to her. Then he saw mother, and his response broke my heart. Suddenly, he was a lost little boy who had been found at last. He saw his mother, his home, and all his lonely birthdays were gone. His nights when scary things made noise under their bed were forgotten. He went to her as if hypnotized. She opened her arms, and she clasped him into her embrace. I felt as if I had stopped breathing. My brother was gone, and he would never come back. Okay, what does that line mean? My brother was gone. I feel like there's a lot of again and agains. He saw his mother. His lonely birthdays were gone. Things that made noise under their bed were gone. So everything, this would be again and again. And the things that were gone were things he feared. Things he feared when Mama wasn't there. Right? Because they didn't grow up with Mama. But now that he sees her, it's like all of those scary things vanished and he feels alive again. So when she says he would never come back, this is kind of confusing, and I'm not sure if it's a tough question or a contradiction, but he doesn't feel the same. as Maya. He feels differently about Mom than Maya, right? Maya's not sure what to make of her. He feels like everything's come back. He had forgotten everything, but I remember how we felt on the few occasions when she sent us toys. I poked the eyes out of each doll, and Bailey took huge rocks and smashed to bits the trucks or trains that came wrapped up in fancy paper. Grandma put her arms around me, and we walked ahead of the others back to the car. She opened the door and sat in the back seat. She looked at me and patted the seat beside her. We left the front seat for the new lovers. Okay, so this is a contrast contradiction. When Mom did send them toys, they kind of messed them all up. That's because they were angry for her leaving, right? She abandoned them when they were little. And we don't know if it's because she couldn't afford to take care of them or why. But if you remember, it just said in the background information their parents divorced and they sent them with their grandmother. So I'm not sure why one of the parents didn't take them. But they were angry all because they had left them all these years and it's like 10 years later. So, grandma's in the back of the car and then Maya gets in the back and it says they left the front seat for the new lovers. It doesn't actually mean people who are lovers in a relationship. It means they're talking about mom and brother. Because brother feels like he's just won the lottery, meeting mom again for the first time. The plan was that grandmother would return to Arkansas 2 days after Bailey arrived. Before Lady and Bailey Jr. reached the car, I said to grandmother, "I want to go back with you, Mama," she asked. "Why?" I said, I don't want to think of you on that train all alone. You will need me." I think that's kind of a lie, right? She can make it on the train alone. But if you look at this, she thinks of grandma as her mother, because that's the person who truly raised her. "When did you make that decision?" I didn't want to answer. She said, "When you saw the reunion of your brother and his mother, that she should have such understanding being an old woman and country, too. I thought it was amazing. It was just as well that I had no answer because Bailey and his mother had already reached the car. Vivian, that's the mom, said to Grandma, "Mother Annie, I didn't look for you two. I knew you would go to the car." Bailey didn't turn to look at me. His eyes were glued to his mother's face. "One thing about you that cannot be denied. You are a true, sensible woman," Grandma said. "Thank you, Vivian." "Junior?" She had to call twice to get his attention. "Junior, how was the train? Did somebody make food for your trip? How'd you leave Willie?" "I don't know." Oh, this is Uncle Willie, talking about his uncle. Suddenly he remembered there was someone else in the world. He grinned for grandmother. "Yes, ma'am, but none of them can cook like you." He turned to me and asked, "What's happening, Mai?" That must be short for Maya, right? "Has California got your tongue? You haven't said a word since I got in the car." I made my voice as cold as possible. I said, "You haven't given me a chance." In a second he said, "What's the matter, Mai?" I had hurt him and I was glad. I said, "I may go back to Stamps with Mama." I wanted to break his heart. Okay, that's a contrast contradiction. "No, ma'am, you will not." My grandmother's voice was unusually hard. My mother asked, "Why would you leave now? You said all you were on was your brother. Well, here he is." She started the car and pulled into traffic. Bailey turned back to her. He added, "Yep, I'm in California." Grandmother held my hand and patted it. I bit the inside of my mouth to keep from crying. No one spoke till we reached our house. Bailey dropped his hand over the back of the front seat. When he wiggled his fingers, I grabbed them. He squeezed my fingers and let them go and drew his hand back to the front seat. The exchange did not escape grandmother's notice, but she said nothing. Wow. Okay, so we're kind of left in a dead end wondering what happens, right? This is kind of a tough question. Even though it doesn't end in a question, we kind of don't know what happens at the end. And we're stuck wondering, is she going to go back? Is grandma going to let her go back to live with her and Bailey stay with Vivian? or are they going to be there together? And we know it's a contrast contradiction that she wanted to break her brother's heart because they're really close, right? And that's not fair. So we might go in and add some more later. But for right now, this was a really long story. I think we got some really good generational memories of, we now know the title. We can go back to the title and write that it stands for Grandma, which is Annie, Mom, who's Vivian, and me, who was Maya. So we know this is a 3-generation story. All right. Awesome. Make sure you get all that.